There's a moment every entrepreneur remembers, the quiet before the leap, the moment when you look at your idea, your plan, your dream, and you realize that nothing, absolutely nothing, guarantees it will work. You stand there on the edge of the unknown, and that edge is risk. Entrepreneurship has always been romanticized as the art of boldness. Fortune favors the brave, but bravery, in truth, is rarely loud. Most of the time, it looks like this: a person alone in a room, staring at a decision that could change everything. Heart racing, hands cold, thoughts looping between hope and fear. Risk isn't just a line on a spreadsheet. It's the space between who you are and who you could become. It's the invisible bridge between vision and reality. Every business plan, every pitch, every late-night conversation, they all orbit around one central question. Am I willing to lose what I have for the chance to gain what I dream? Most people see risk as an enemy, something to eliminate, something to manage, something to fear. But for the entrepreneur, risk is not optional. It's the oxygen of creation. To build something new is to challenge the stability of what already exists. And that act, that defiance, is inherently risky. When you start a business, you're not just betting on a product or a market. You're betting on yourself. You're saying, I believe my vision of the world deserves a place in it. That belief is both beautiful and terrifying. Because believing means exposing yourself to uncertainty, to judgment, to failure, to loss. The psychology of risk begins long before you take action. It begins in the quiet conversations inside your mind. Is this the right time? What if I fail? What if I'm not ready? Those questions aren't signs of weakness. They're proof you care. They're the mind's way of protecting you from pain. Our brains were designed to keep us safe, not successful. To preserve energy, not to pursue greatness. So when you feel fear before a big decision, you're not broken, you're human. You're simply negotiating with evolution. Yet something extraordinary happens in the minds of entrepreneurs. They learn to dance with that fear instead of running from it. They start to reinterpret it, to see risk not as a wall, but as a doorway. Where others see chaos, they sense potential. Where others freeze, they calculate. Where others see loss, they see possibility. This ability to reframe uncertainty is not luck. It's a learned psychology. It's what separates a reckless gambler from a visionary. Imagine two people standing at the same cliff. Both see the fog. Both feel the wind. Both know there's no guarantee of safety. One steps back. The other steps forward. The difference is not courage. It's clarity. The one who steps forward has made peace with the truth that there will never be a perfect moment, that there will always be a reason to wait, and that waiting too long is its own kind of failure. Risk, then, becomes a mirror. It reflects not what the world is, but what you believe about yourself. If you think you're capable, risk looks like opportunity. If you think you're unworthy, risk looks like danger. That's why no two people perceive risk the same way. It's filtered through our past, our experiences, traumas, and triumphs. To understand your relationship with risk, you must first understand the stories you tell yourself about success and failure. Because risk isn't out there in the world, it lives in here. Many entrepreneurs confuse risk with recklessness. They believe the key to success is bold action. Move fast, break things. But true risk-takers don't move fast. They move consciously. They understand that every decision has weight, and that awareness is the difference between growth and collapse. They don't chase risk for the thrill of it. They accept it as the cost of creating something meaningful. So what is risk, really? It's the unknown, yes. But more than that, it's commitment. It's saying, I will walk this road even though I can't see the end. And that commitment transforms you. Because every time you face uncertainty and act anyway, you train your mind to handle a greater level of ambiguity. That's what growth feels like. Not confidence, but capacity. To take risk consciously is to live intentionally. It means you stop waiting for certainty and start building faith in your ability to adapt. Because success in business isn't about eliminating risk. It's about strengthening your relationship with it. It's about becoming the kind of person who can stay calm inside the storm. In this series, we'll go deeper. We'll explore how fear shapes risk perception, how your brain tricks you into avoiding opportunity, and how to transform uncertainty into awareness. Because mastering risk isn't about daring the world. It's about understanding yourself. This is Freedom Mind, where we explore the thoughts that build empires. It's one of the oldest instincts in the human brain, a signal that whispers, stay alive. For entrepreneurs, fear doesn't come in the form of tigers or fire anymore. It comes dressed as uncertainty, as market shifts, as cash flow drops, as silence after a big pitch. It hides in emails, in numbers, in sleepless nights. But no matter how modern our world becomes, the feeling remains ancient. You see, fear isn't the enemy. It's information. It's the body's way of saying, something here matters. But when that signal gets too loud, it stops being useful and starts becoming a lens that distorts how we see risk. Let's talk about how that distortion works. When you're afraid, your brain activates what psychologists call the amygdala, the emotional alarm center. Its job is simple: detect threats and respond fast. Not accurately, not intelligently, just fast. That's why fear doesn't analyze, it reacts. So when an entrepreneur says, this idea might fail, what if people don't buy? What if I lose everything? The amygdala doesn't check the data or calculate probabilities. It just screams, danger. And the moment that happens, your perception narrows. You stop seeing opportunity and start seeing only what could go wrong. Psychologists call this loss aversion, the fact that our minds are wired to fear losing something twice as much as we desire gaining it. It's a powerful bias. It's why someone might reject a 50/50th chance to double their money, because the possibility of losing feels unbearable. In entrepreneurship, that bias can be deadly, because every meaningful step forward involves some form of loss: comfort, stability, approval, certainty. Imagine two founders, both looking at the same business opportunity. One feels excitement. This could change everything. The other feels anxiety. This could ruin everything. Same facts, different stories. That's what fear does. It doesn't change reality. It changes the story you tell yourself about it. And when you repeat that story long enough, you begin to mistake it for truth. Here's the irony. Many entrepreneurs believe they're being realistic when they're actually being afraid. They call it logic. They call it strategy. But deep down, it's fear dressed in reason. Now's not the right time. I'll start when I have more capital. The market isn't ready. Maybe those statements are true. But maybe they're just fear, whispering in the language of logic. Fear doesn't always shout. Sometimes it sounds like good advice. It says, play it safe. Wait a little longer. Don't risk what you have. But here's the quiet truth. Waiting is a risk. Playing it safe is a decision. Every time you delay action, you trade the certainty of the present for the illusion of control. And illusions are expensive. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called risk perception theory. It explains why we often feel a situation is riskier than it really is, especially when emotion is involved. Fear amplifies uncertainty. It blurs the edges of possibility. When fear dominates, your mind doesn't calculate. It catastrophizes. A small setback becomes a sign of doom. A bad meeting becomes a prophecy. A slow week becomes a failure. Fear magnifies, distorts, dramatizes. And soon, you're not responding to reality. You're responding to your imagination. Think about the last time you hesitated to take a step forward. Maybe it was quitting your job, launching your product, investing in yourself. What stopped you wasn't lack of opportunity. It was the story fear told you. You might lose everything. You're not ready. What will people think? But here's the truth. Fear doesn't predict the future. It projects the past. It's your mind replaying old pain, trying to protect you from feeling it again. The fear of failure usually comes from the memory of failure. The fear of rejection comes from the experience of being unseen. The fear of loss comes from once having lost something you loved. Fear is never about what's happening now. It's about what once happened and what you never want to feel again. So how do we navigate it? How do we make peace with fear without letting it dictate every choice we make? The first step is awareness. When you feel afraid, pause. Don't fight it. Ask yourself, what exactly am I afraid will happen? Is this a fact or a story? What's the cost of letting this fear make the decision for me? That small act of questioning begins to separate you from your fear. You stop being inside it and start observing it. And that shift changes everything. In the minds of great entrepreneurs, fear is not a red light, it's a compass. It points toward what matters most. The projects that scare you, the conversations you avoid, the ideas that feel too big, those are often the ones that define your path. Fear, when interpreted correctly, doesn't say stop. It says pay attention. But learning to listen to fear without obeying it, that's a lifelong skill. Because fear isn't logical, it's emotional. It doesn't respond to spreadsheets or strategies. It only softens when you face it with presence. The moment you name it, it loses half its power. The moment you take one small step despite it, it begins to shrink. Fear feeds on avoidance. Action starves it. The truth is, no entrepreneur is ever fearless. That's a myth. The difference between those who move and those who freeze is not the absence of fear. It's their relationship with it. They've learned to reinterpret the signal. They know that fear means they're entering a space of growth. They've built tolerance for uncertainty, a kind of psychological resilience that says, I may not know what's ahead, but I trust myself to handle it. That trust, that quiet confidence, is what transforms risk from terror into potential. So next time you feel fear whispering in your ear, don't silence it. Listen, because fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're standing on the threshold of something that matters. Fear doesn't stop you from taking risks. It changes how you see them. And once you understand that, you begin to see clearly again. This is Freedom Mind, where we explore the thoughts that build empires. There are two kinds of risk in business, the ones that build you and the ones that break you. Both feel the same in the beginning. The racing pulse, the tension in your chest, the question that sits quietly in your mind, should I do it? But the difference between a calculated risk and an impulsive one isn't the size of the decision. It's the state of mind behind it. A calculated risk is born from clarity. It's when you act from vision, not emotion. It's when you take time to see the board before you move the piece. An impulsive risk, on the other hand, is driven by the noise, by pressure, by ego, by desperation. It's the difference between stepping forward and jumping blind. Both can lead to success. Both can lead to failure. But only one helps you learn from the outcome. Think of a calculated risk as a conversation with reality. You listen first. You observe the environment, the market, the timing, your resources, your energy. Then you act, not because you crave the rush, but because you've decided that inaction costs more than uncertainty. Calculated risk is intentional exposure. It's vulnerability on purpose. It's saying, I know what I can lose. I've accepted it. And I still choose to move forward. That's not recklessness. That's awareness. Now, impulsive risk feels different. It often comes from emotion disguised as clarity. You feel stuck, pressured, or unseen, and so you move fast, hoping that speed will solve what silence can't. But impulsive risk is reaction, not reflection. It's motion mistaken for progress. It feels powerful in the moment, but it's often a form of escape. You're not moving towards something. You're running away from discomfort. And that's the danger, because action taken to avoid pain rarely leads to growth. It just creates a different kind of pain later. In business, impulsive risk often looks like this: launching a product before it's ready, just to prove yourself; hiring too fast, because you're afraid of falling behind; saying yes to every opportunity, because saying no feels like loss. Each of these choices feels bold in the moment. But later, when the adrenaline fades, you realize you were chasing relief, not results. Calculated risk, however, looks quieter, less dramatic, more patient. It's the founder who spends weeks understanding their customer before building a feature. It's the entrepreneur who walks away from a shiny deal because it doesn't align with long-term values. It's the investor who says, "Not yet," when everyone else is shouting, "Now or never." That's the subtlety of mastery, understanding that timing is a strategy, not a coincidence. Many people misunderstand what it means to be a risk taker. They imagine someone fearless, impulsive, unpredictable, a person who thrives on chaos. But real entrepreneurs know that risk is sacred. You don't play with it carelessly. You don't gamble with your purpose. You use it with precision, like a tool. Calculated risk is not about control. It's about conscious surrender. You accept the variables, but you stay anchored in intention. That's why calculated risk takers look calm. They're not immune to fear. They've simply made peace with consequence. Let me tell you a truth few people admit. Impulsivity often hides behind ambition. It's easy to justify a rushed decision when you call it boldness. It sounds noble, even heroic. But boldness without awareness is just noise. And noise, in business, is expensive. If you look closely, impulsivity is usually fueled by something deeper: insecurity, the desire to prove yourself, the fear of missing out, a silent need for validation. You think you're chasing opportunity, but you're really trying to quiet the voice that says, "You're not doing enough." That voice doesn't need speed. It needs stillness. Calculated risk begins with a pause, a breath. That breath is where intuition and analysis meet. It's not about eliminating emotion. It's about translating it. What does excitement mean? What does hesitation mean? Maybe excitement means alignment. Maybe hesitation means unreadiness. Calculated risk isn't just thinking, it's listening deeply. Now, this doesn't mean you should overthink every move. Paralysis by analysis is just fear in a different disguise. But the art of taking good risks is the art of knowing when to wait and when to leap. The difference lies in intention. Ask yourself before any big decision, am I moving because it's right, or because I can't stand still any longer? That one question can save you years of regret. Calculated risk doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees growth. Because even if you fail with awareness. You understand what happened, why it happened, and how to move differently next time. Impulsive risk gives you stories. Calculated risk gives you wisdom. So, when you face your next big decision, don't just ask, "What if it works?" Or, "What if it fails?" Ask instead, "What part of me is making this choice?" If it's fear, pause. If it's ego, reflect. If it's clarity, then move. Because in the end, risk doesn't reward the fastest. It rewards the most aware. There's a moment in every entrepreneur's story, a long pause before the first move. You've done the research. You've run the numbers. You've imagined what it could be. And yet, your hand won't move. Not because you don't know what to do, but because something inside you whispers, "What if I'm not ready?" That whisper, that quiet hesitation, is the invisible wall that stops more dreams than failure ever could. We often think risk is about money, market, or competition. But in truth, the greatest risk lives in the mind. It's not the leap itself that scares us. It's what the leap says about us. When you step into risk, you expose your identity. You declare, "This is who I am. This is what I believe." And that declaration invites judgment from others, from the world, from yourself. That's where most people freeze. Not at the sight of danger, but at the thought being seen. Let's talk about the first barrier, perfectionism. Perfectionism looks noble on the surface, the desire to get things right, to deliver excellence, to prove competence. But underneath, it's often fear wearing a mask. The fear of imperfection is the fear of rejection. It's the belief that unless something is flawless, you don't deserve to start. So you polish the plan. You redesign the logo. You rewrite the business model again and again until time runs out. Perfectionism convinces you that preparation is progress, but sometimes it's just procrastination dressed in productivity. Because no amount of planning can protect you from the uncertainty of real action. The truth is, your first step will never be perfect. It's not supposed to be. Perfectionism delays learning. And the longer you delay, the more the world moves on without you. The second barrier, imposter syndrome. That quiet voice that says, "Who am I to do this? I'm not as smart, as qualified, as experienced as others." Imposter syndrome isn't about lacking skill. It's about doubting your right to succeed. You've built this image of success as something that belongs to other people, the ones with more money, more confidence, more connections. So when opportunity appears, you step back, you shrink. You tell yourself you're being realistic, but what you're really doing is protecting your comfort zone. Here's the truth. No one feels ready when they begin. Every entrepreneur you admire started from confusion, fear, and uncertainty. Readiness is not a requirement, it's a result. It comes after you leap, not before. The third barrier, fear of judgment. This one runs deep. It's the quiet terror that keeps ideas locked inside notebooks, dreams hidden in drafts, and potential buried under politeness. You're afraid that if you try and fail, people will laugh. Or worse, they'll stop taking you seriously. That fear makes you edit yourself before the world even has a chance to respond. But here's the paradox. You cannot be admired for something you never showed. And you cannot be respected for a risk you never took. Judgment will always exist. People will always have opinions. But they can't judge what you never create. So you must choose. Live with the discomfort of being seen, or the regret of being invisible. And then there's the most silent barrier of all, fear of success. It sounds strange, doesn't it? Why would anyone fear success? But think deeper. Success means responsibility. It means visibility. It means you can no longer hide behind potential. You must live up to it. That's heavy. For many, it's easier to stay in almost ready, almost launching, almost there. Because almost is safe. You can dream without consequence. But dreams without risk become prisons made of comfort. Here's the truth most people avoid. Taking the leap is never about courage alone. It's about trust. Not trust in the world, not trust in luck, but trust in your capacity to adapt. You don't leap because you know you'll win. You leap because you know you can handle losing and learn from it. That's the difference between fear and growth. Fear says, "What if I can't handle it?" Growth says, "Even if I can't handle it now, I'll learn to." That mindset, that shift, changes everything. Every entrepreneur faces these barriers: perfectionism, self-doubt, judgment, fear. The question isn't whether they exist. It's whether you'll let them decide for you. Because behind every successful founder is not a person without fear, but someone who refused to let fear have the final word. When you're standing on the edge of your next big decision, don't wait for the fear to disappear. It won't. Just make sure that when you leap, it's you who's deciding, not your doubts. Success stories often sound clean in hindsight. We read about the victories, the funding, the breakthrough, the freedom. But when you speak to those who lived it, their stories sound very different. Not like lightning, but like weather. Slowly forming, unpredictable, shaped by storms and stillness alike. Every great entrepreneur has faced moments where logic said, stop, and something deeper whispered, keep going. That whisper, that instinct, is what connects them all. Risk takers aren't fearless. They're fluent in fear. They've learned to translate it, to hear the difference between a warning and a limitation. Because not every fear means don't move. Sometimes fear just means pay attention. That awareness, that emotional intelligence, is the secret skill no one talks about. It's not luck. It's not even timing. It's the ability to stay calm long enough to understand your fear before it turns into panic. There's a story about Jeff Bezos. Before Amazon was a company, it was an idea. He had a stable job, good income, a predictable future. And yet, something inside him kept asking, what will I regret more, doing this and failing, or never trying at all? He called it the regret minimization framework. It wasn't about chasing success. It was about avoiding lifelong what ifs. That's the pattern among those who take powerful risks. They don't measure risk by what they might lose. They measure it by what they might miss. Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, once said her father used to ask her every night, what did you fail at today? He didn't celebrate success. He celebrated effort. He taught her that failure isn't a verdict. It's data. That shift in perspective freed her to take bold risks because failure was no longer proof of inadequacy. It was proof of courage. You see, successful risk takers reframe failure not as a signal to stop, but as feedback to adjust. They know that the first no doesn't define the outcome. It defines the lesson. Another lesson they share: they don't chase certainty. They build adaptability. While others seek safety, they seek skill. They ask themselves, what do I need to learn to survive if this fails? That's how Elon Musk thinks when he enters a new industry. He doesn't ask if it's possible. He asks how much he's willing to learn to make it possible. To a true risk taker, every risk is an education disguised as danger. They accept uncertainty because they know they can grow within it. That mindset, that trust in one's ability to evolve, is what turns risk into resilience. Another pattern emerges. Successful risk takers are deeply self-aware. They don't take every risk that comes their way. They choose carefully, guided by values, not by hype. Warren Buffett once said, the difference between successful people and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything. Risk isn't about how many moves you make. It's about how many aligned moves you make. Clarity of purpose acts like a compass. Without it, every risk feels random. With it, even failure feels like progress. And perhaps the most profound lesson of all, they detach their identity from their outcomes. The failed startup doesn't mean you are a failure. The missed opportunity doesn't mean you're not capable. When your self-worth depends on success, risk becomes unbearable. But when you see yourself as a learner, not a performer, risk becomes natural. Richard Branson once said, you don't learn to walk by following rules. You learn by doing and by falling over. Every fall teaches balance. Every failure builds context. That's why the most resilient entrepreneurs aren't obsessed with never failing. They're obsessed with never wasting a failure. Look closely and you'll see, risk takers don't have superhuman courage. They have superhuman honesty. They don't lie to themselves about what they want, or who they are, or how hard it will be. They accept the full cost of their dreams, the uncertainty, the exhaustion, the loneliness. But in that acceptance, they find something priceless: peace. Because once you've accepted the worst, the only thing left is possibility. So, what can we learn from them? Start where you are. Trust what you know. Be willing to look foolish for something meaningful. Every bold choice carries both risk and reward, but only one of them you get to keep. The reward fades. The lesson remains. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize that risk wasn't something you conquered. It was something you learned to understand. The goal isn't to live without risk. The goal is to live without fear of it. By now, you've learned that risk isn't an enemy. It's a mirror, a teacher, a companion on every step of your entrepreneurial path. The final question, then, is this. How do you live with risk, not against it? How do you make decisions that embrace uncertainty without letting it consume you? That's where awareness becomes power. Awareness doesn't eliminate uncertainty. It illuminates it. It turns "I don't know" into "I can understand." It turns "I'm scared" into "I'm listening." Awareness is the space between impulse and action. It's the pause that gives meaning to movement. And that pause, that moment of presence, is what separates reaction from decision. When you integrate risk awareness into decision-making, you don't rush to act. You start by observing. Ask yourself 3 simple questions before every major choice. What am I afraid of losing? What am I hoping to gain? Which emotion is driving me right now? Fear or clarity? These 3 questions reveal the architecture of your decision. They strip away illusion and expose truth. Because when you name your fear, you neutralize it. You move it from the subconscious, where it controls you, to the conscious, where you control it. Awareness also means embracing slow thinking. In a world addicted to speed, slowness feels like weakness. But for entrepreneurs, it's a form of wisdom. Every great founder, from Steve Jobs to Patagonia's Yvon Chouinard, speaks of moments when they paused long enough to hear the difference between opportunity and distraction. That's what awareness gives you: discernment. The ability to see not just what shines, but what aligns. Integrating risk awareness isn't just about strategy. It's about self-regulation. When your emotions surge, when fear, greed, or excitement take over, awareness pulls you back to center. It reminds you that your worth is not attached to the outcome, but to the integrity of your process. That's how you stay stable in chaos. Not by predicting the storm, but by trusting the strength of your anchor. Let's break it down more tangibly. Here's what a risk-aware decision process looks like. Observation. See the full picture. Don't rush to interpret. Just see. Emotion check. Name what you feel. Fear, pressure, excitement, ego. Reality testing. Ask for data, not validation. What's actually true? Scenario building. Imagine best case, worst case, and most likely outcomes. Alignment check. Does this choice move you closer to your long-term vision, or just satisfy a short-term emotion? Conscious action. When it feels clear, move, decisively but calmly. That's how awareness turns chaos into clarity. You don't make faster decisions. You make truer ones. Being risk-aware also means you stop worshiping certainty. You realize that success doesn't come from avoiding mistakes. It comes from staying awake inside them. You stop trying to predict every turn, and instead, build the resilience to navigate whatever comes. Because business isn't a game of perfection. It's a practice of presence. When you stop fearing risk, you begin to see that every challenge carries a message. Here is where you can grow next. So what does this mean for you? Sitting here, listening in the dark? It means that your next big decision doesn't need to be fearless. It needs to be conscious. It means that you don't need to eliminate risk. You need to understand your relationship with it. You don't need certainty to move forward. You need commitment. Commitment to yourself, to your purpose, to your growth. Every great risk-taker eventually learns this. Risk doesn't make you brave. Awareness does. Because awareness lets you walk into the unknown with your eyes open. Not blind, not reckless, but awake. And that's the moment true freedom begins. Not freedom from fear, but freedom within it. So as you stand at your next crossroads, remember this. You are not the person who waits for the perfect moment. You are the person who creates it. One deliberate step, one honest choice, one aware risk at a time. This is Freedom Mind, where we explore the thoughts that build empires.